I believe this evening calls for a celebration.
To us. To us.
To us.
I couldn't agree more.
The crystal chandelier above Penelope Grant's head cost more than her entire college education. She knew this because Simone Beaumont had announced it to the table exactly 7 minutes ago. Right after commenting on Penelope's quaint dress from last season's clearance rack, Penelope gripped her fork and smiled. She'd survived worse than a room full of rich people who thought their bank accounts made them interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Theodore Ashcroft stood at the head of the mahogany table, his weathered hands resting on his chair. I'd like to introduce the lead architect for our Hudson Valley project, Miss Penelope Grant. The silent judgment, the reaction was immediate. 12 faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to open contempt. Penelope had learned to read a room in seconds, a survival skill from years of fighting for space in a world that didn't think she belonged. Cordelia Ashcroft, draped in pearls that probably cost more than a small car, raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Her silver hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. This is the prodigy you've been raving about, Theodore? She looks barely old enough to have a degree. I'm 28, Mrs. Ashcroft, Penelope said evenly. And I have too. How ambitious, Cordelia replied, her smile sharp as broken glass. Though education and experience are quite different things, aren't they? Across the table, Simone leaned into her boyfriend's shoulder, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Julian, darling, is this really necessary? You know what happened with the last architect your father hired without consulting you? The first confrontation, Penelope finally allowed herself to look at him. Julian Ashcroft sat at his mother's right hand like a prince at court. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, the tailored suit that probably cost $5,000. The watch that glinted gold in the candlelight. The way he held his wine glass like he owned the vineyard that produced it. His eyes were green, she noticed. Not the warm green of summer grass, but the cold green of deep water. And they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. My father makes his own decisions, Julian said, his voice smooth and controlled. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about what makes you qualified for a $50 million project, Miss Grant. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. I designed the Riverside Community Center that won the National Architecture Award last year, Penelope said. I've completed 12 commercial projects in 5 years, all under budget and ahead of schedule. And I've never had a client lawsuit, which I understand is more than your previous architect could claim, Theodore chuckled, but quickly disguised it with a cough. Simone's perfectly glossed lips pressed into a thin line. Riverside. Isn't that in some depressed neighborhood in Queens? Hardly comparable to what the Ashcrofts build. The breaking point, you're right, Penelope said, meeting Simone's gaze directly. The people who use that community center can't afford to pay me in diamonds and compliments. They pay in gratitude and actual respect. It's a different currency, but I find it has more value. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Julian set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. My father obviously sees something in you. I hope for both your sakes that his faith isn't misplaced. The dinner crawled forward like a wounded animal. Course after course appeared. It's more elaborate than the last while. Cordelia asked pointed questions about Penelope's family background, her education, her connections. Every question was designed to highlight what Penelope lacked: the right schools, the right neighborhood, the right last name. Penelope answered each one honestly, refusing to apologize for where she came from, the wine incident. More wine, Miss Grant? Simone reached for the bottle, her movements graceful and calculated.
Oh, thank you.
The glass tipped. Red wine arced through the air in slow motion, splashing across Penelope's cream-colored blouse. The fabric absorbed the dark liquid instantly, spreading like blood across her chest. Simone pressed her hand to her mouth, her blue eyes wide with fake horror. I'm so terribly sorry. That blouse is completely ruined. Cordelia dabbed her lips with her napkin, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. What a shame. Though I suppose these accidents happen when one isn't accustomed to formal dining. The staff will help you clean up, dear. Perhaps we have something in the closet that might fit, though I'm not sure we keep anything quite so... casual. The stand Penelope looked down at her ruined blouse, then around the table. Theodore looked genuinely apologetic. The other guests looked uncomfortable or amused. Julian's expression was completely unreadable, his jaw tight, his eyes on his plate. She waited for him to say something. Anything. He remained silent. Something inside Penelope hardened into steel. She stood slowly, wine dripping onto the Persian rug beneath her chair. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly calm. "You know what, Mrs. Ashcroft? You're absolutely right. I'm not accustomed to this." She gestured at the opulent room, the elaborate table settings, the people who thought cruelty was sophisticated when wrapped in expensive clothes. "I'm accustomed to environments where people judge you on your talent and character, not your pedigree. Where a handshake means something and respect isn't something you buy at auction." She picked up her portfolio from beside her chair. "I came here thinking this was a professional opportunity. I see now it was an audition to be your entertainment for the evening. Thank you for making that clear before I wasted any more of my time." The exec Cordelia's face turned pink. "How dare you speak to me, Miss Grant?" Theodore's voice cut through his wife's outrage. "My office. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp." Penelope turned to face him. "We have a contract to discuss," he continued, his eyes holding hers. "And a project that won't build itself?" For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of an antique clock on the mantel. 9 o'clock, Penelope confirmed. She turned toward the door, her head high. Her steps steady despite the wine soaking through to her skin. She didn't see. Julian pushed back from the table so forcefully his chair rocked. Didn't see Simone grab his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Didn't see the look on his face as he watched her walk away, a look that was equal parts fury and something else entirely. The decision. Cordelia leaned close to her son as Penelope disappeared into the hallway. "That girl is dangerous, Julian. She'll poison your father against us. Against the family." Julian's eyes remained fixed on the empty doorway. His mother's words washed over him. All he could see was the way Penelope had stood in front of them, all wind-stained and magnificent, refusing to bow. "Mother," he said quietly, "I need to make a phone call." As he left the dining room, Cordelia and Simone exchanged a look. They both knew that look in Julian's eyes. They'd seen it before when he wanted something he couldn't have, and they both understood that Penelope Grant had just become the biggest threat to their carefully constructed.
Out.
Penelope stood on the mansion's front steps, waiting for her car service. The night air was cool against her wine-soaked blouse. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate asking how dinner went. Penelope looked back at the towering mansion, its windows glowing like eyes in the darkness. "Interesting," she typed back. "Definitely interesting." She had no idea that 3 floors above, Julian stood at his window watching her, his phone in his hand, already pulling up everything he could find about the woman who had just walked away from him. The Ashcroft Industries building cut into the Manhattan skyline like a blade, 60 floors of steel and ambition. Penelope stood on the sidewalk Monday morning, her new messenger bag, heavy with sketches and determination. The wine-stained blouse had been sacrificed to the garbage bin. Today she wore her best blazer, dark gray and professional, paired with pants she'd had tailored to perfection. If she was walking into enemy territory, she'd do it looking like she belonged. "Miss Grant?" A security guard with kind eyes checked his tablet. 42nd floor, Architectural Division. "Mr. Ashcroft is expecting you." The elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. Each floor that flashed by represented millions of dollars, thousands of careers, hundreds of dreams built on Theodore Ashcroft's empire. The welcome Theodore's office was surprisingly understated. Yes, there were floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, but the furniture was worn leather, and the shelves were crammed with models of buildings rather than corporate trophies. "Sit." Theodore gestured to a chair across from his desk. He looked tired, older than he had at dinner. "I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Grant. What happened Friday night was inexcusable. Mr. Ashcroft, please, let me finish." He held up a hand. "I've been married to Cordelia for 37 years. I love her, but I'm not blind to her faults. She believes that people like us people with money are somehow fundamentally better than everyone else. She's wrong." Penelope sat perfectly still, unsure where this was going. "My son." Theodore paused, choosing his words carefully. Julian is complicated. He's brilliant, ruthless in business, but he's been raised in a world where everything has been given to him, including the right to judge others without consequence. Then why am I here? Penelope asked quietly. Because I built this company on two principles: find the best people and give them room to prove it. Why? He slid a folder across the desk. The Hudson Valley Project is my legacy. I want it done right, and I believe you're the one to do it. But I won't lie to you. It won't be easy. You'll be working closely with Julian. He oversees all major projects. The contract. Penelope opened the folder. The numbers made her dizzy. The salary alone would change her life, would let her help her sister with college, would finally prove to her father that leaving his construction business to chase her dreams had been worth it. If I sign this, she said slowly, I need to know that I'll have the authority to do my job. I won't be undermined or sabotaged. You have my word, and mine still means something in this company. Theodore's eyes were steady. But Miss Grant, Penelope, need to warn you. My wife and Miss Beaumont are not women who forget perceived slights. And Julian, ... He trailed off, looking troubled. Just be careful. Penelope thought about the look in Julian's eyes as she'd left the dinner, cold fury mixed with something else she couldn't name. Then she thought about her drafty apartment in Brooklyn, her student loans, the sketches she'd drawn 1,000 times. Because she couldn't afford the software to render them properly, she picked up the pen and signed. The new office, her office, was on the 38th floor. A glass-walled space with a view of the East River and enough square footage to hold her entire apartment. The desk was sleek chrome and wood. The computer was top dash of dash the dash line. This was real. She spent the morning meeting her team. 3 junior architects who looked at her with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. News of the dinner had already spread through the office grapevine. She could see it in their careful politeness, the way they called her Miss Grant instead of Penelope. I know what you've heard, she told them in their first team meeting. I'm sure half of it is exaggerated and the other half is somehow worse. Here's what matters. I'm here to build something incredible. If you want to be part of that, I need your best work. If you want to be part of office politics, there's the door. One of them, a young woman named Rachel with intelligent eyes, smiled. I think we're going to get along fine. The Riverside Project at 2 o'clock. Penelope's phone buzzed. An email from Julian's assistant. Conference room A2:30 p.m. Riverside Project kickoff meeting. Attendance mandatory. 30 minutes to prepare. Penelope pulled up everything she'd drafted over the weekend: preliminary sketches, budget projections, timeline proposals. She'd barely slept, too wired with nervous energy to do anything but work. The conference room was already full when she arrived. 20 people sat around an oval table, all eyes turning toward her as she entered. At the head of the table, Julian stood looking at his phone. Not acknowledging her entrance, he wore a navy suit today, his dark hair perfectly styled. In the bright conference room lights, she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the way his shoulders filled out his jacket. He was objectively handsome, the kind of handsome that came from good genetics and better personal trainers. He was also, she reminded herself, the man who had sat silently while his girlfriend humiliated her.
You're late,
he said without looking up from his phone. Penelope checked her watch. I'm 4 minutes early to my meetings. Early means 15 minutes before start time. Now he looked at her, those green eyes cold. I expect you to learn our culture quickly, Miss Grant. The presentation, she refused to let him rattle her. Shall we begin? For the next hour, she presented her vision for the Riverside Projector. Mixed-use development that would combine luxury apartments with affordable housing. Retail space with community gardens. Profit with purpose. She'd studied Theodore's original vision obsessively, understood what he wanted. Not just another building, but something that gave back to the community. The team asked questions. She answered each one confidently, pulling up data, showing case studies, demonstrating that she'd thought through every angle, through it all. Julian remained silent, his fingers steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long moment, while one of the senior project managers said, That's certainly ambitious. The objection ambitious. Julian finally spoke, his voice cutting through the murmur of agreement. That's one word for it. Reckless is another. Penelope felt every eye in the room turn to watch the collision. The affordable housing component, Julian continued, standing and walking to the screen where her designs glowed. You're proposing that 30% of units be below market rate. That's suicide for our profit margins. It's what your father asked for, Penelope countered. He was very clear that this project should serve the community, not just extract money from it. My father is sentimental about his hometown. I'm practical about our shareholders. Julian clicked to the next slide. And this timeline, 18 months from groundbreaking to completion, we've never finished a project of this scale in under 2 years. You've never had me, Penelope said quietly. The room went dead silent. Julian's eyes locked on hers. And for a moment the air between them felt electric, charged with something that had nothing to do with architecture. Big words from someone with no track record on projects of this scale, he said softly, dangerously. I'm not willing to risk $100 million development on your untested ego. Challenge, Penelope stood, gathering her materials. Then I guess this meeting is over. Sit down, Julian commanded. No. She met his gaze directly, refusing to flinch. You've made your opinion clear, Mr. Ashcroft. You don't think I'm qualified. You don't think I can deliver? So why waste everyone's time pretending to give me a chance? Because my father wants you here. Your father hired me because he believes in my vision. If you can't respect that, then we have nothing more to discuss. She walked toward the door. The plans need work, Julian called after her. The structural engineering on the North Tower is flawed. The traffic flow analysis ignores peak hours. And your cost projections are optimistic to the point of fantasy. Penelope stopped, her hand on the door handle. She turned back slowly. And I'll fix them, she said. Send me your notes. All of them. I'll have revisions on your desk by Friday. Something flickered in Julian's expressions. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. Friday is 4 days away. The revisions you're talking about would take 2 weeks minimum. And I guess I should stop wasting time in pointless meetings. Shh. She pulled open the door. Send the notes. The aftermath back in her office, Penelope's hand shook as she closed the door. Rachel appeared minutes later with coffee and a concerned expression. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, Rachel said, setting down the mug. Possibly both. He's trying to make me quit, Penelope said, staring out at the river. Push me until I break, then tell Theodore I couldn't handle the pressure. So what are you going to do? Penelope turned back to her computer, already pulling up the structural files. I'm going to prove him wrong. At 7 o'clock, most of the office had emptied. Penelope was deep in calculations when her office door opened without warning. She looked up to find Julian standing in the doorway, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened. You're still here, he said. Did you expect me to run away crying? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. In the enclosed space, she became aware of how tall he was, how his presence seemed to fill the room. Most people would have, he admitted. I've been told I can be ... intense. Tense is fine. Dismissive isn't. Penelope saved her work and stood, refusing to let him tower over her. Let me be very clear, Mr. Ashcroft. I don't care that you're rich. I don't care that you're handsome. I don't care that every person in this building probably jumps when you snap your fingers. I care about building something meaningful. If you can't handle working with someone who won't bow down to you, that's your problem, not mine. The truth, Julian stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a short, harsh sound. You think I'm handsome? That's what you took from that entire speech? No. His expression sobered. I heard all of it. And you're right, have been trying to push you out. You want to know why? Honestly? I don't care why, because I watched you walk out of that dinner with your head held high, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. The words came out rough, almost angry, because you looked at my mother and my girlfriend and me like we were everything wrong with the world, and you were right. Because in 33 years, no one has ever made me feel ashamed of who I am, And you did it in under an hour? Penelope stared at him, her prepared anger deflating. I don't understand. Neither do I. Julian ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. I should want you gone. You're disruptive, insubordinate, and you make me question everything I've built my life around. But instead, I came up here to tell you that your structural engineering isn't flawed. It's brilliant. And I want to know how you thought of it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibilities. Julian, she started. A sharp knock interrupted them. The door opened, and Simone Beaumont stood framed in the doorway, her expression turning glacial as she took in the Sen Julian and Penelope alone in the dim office, standing close enough to share secrets.
Ollie.
Simone's voice dripped poison. Your mother is waiting for us at the restaurant. You're late. Julian's expression shuddered, becoming unreadable again. I'll be right there now, Julian. It wasn't a request. He looked at Penelope one more time, something complicated, flickering in his eyes. Then he followed Simone out, leaving Penelope alone in her office, her heart racing, wondering what the hell had just happened. The warning what she didn't see, Simone and Julian in the elevator, her nails digging into his arm. You're playing with fire, Simone hissed. That girl is trying to seduce you to secure her position.
Oh.
Don't be ridiculous. I'm not blind, Julian. Neither is your mother. We've already started looking into Miss Grant's background. Did you know her father was a construction worker? That she grew up in a trailer park? That she's drowning in debt? So she came from nothing and made something of herself. That's admirable. It's desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. Simone's eyes were hard. By the time we're done, she'll be lucky to get a job designing garden sheds. What Penelope didn't know, Cordelia Ashcroft was already making phone calls. 2 board members. 2 investors. To anyone who might help push out the threat to her family's perfect image, but Penelope would find out soon enough. And when she did, the real battle would begin. Thursday night. Penelope stayed at the office until midnight, perfecting her revisions. Friday morning, she arrived at 6, running through her presentation one final time. The board meeting was at 9, her chance to prove that Julian's objections were unfounded, that her vision for Riverside could work at 8:30. She went to print her materials. The file was corrupted. No. Penelope's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying everything she could think of. Every backup, every version all corrupted. 3 days of work, hundreds of hours of calculations, gone. Rachel appeared at her desk, her face pale. Penelope, you need to see this. She pulled up an email chain that had been accidentally forwarded to her by someone in IT. Cordelia Ashcroft to the board members. Concerns about Penelope's qualifications. Questions about her judgment. Subtle suggestions that Theodore was too emotionally invested in his hometown project to see clearly. When did this go out? Last night? To all 15 board members. Rachel's voice was tight with anger. They're going to crucify you in that meeting. Penelope looked at her computer screen, at the corrupted files that represented her best work. She could accuse someone of sabotage, but she had no proof. She could try to recreate the presentation in 30 minutes, but it would be rushed, incomplete, or she could do something bold. The boardroom was on the 60th floor. All dark wood and leather chairs arranged around a massive table. 15 of the most powerful people in real estate sat waiting, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Theodore sat at the head of the table, looking worried. Julian was at his right hand, his face unreadable. Cordelia sat in the visitor section, her smile thin and satisfied. Miss Grant, Theodore began, we're ready for your presentation. Penelope stood, walked to the front of the room, and deliberately closed her laptop. I'm not going to present today, she said clearly. The murmurs started immediately. Instead, she continued, pulling out a piece of paper, I'm going to tell you a story. 30 years ago, Theodore Ashcroft grew up in Riverside. His father worked in a factory. His mother cleaned houses. He understands what it means to need opportunity, to need someone to believe in you. She looked directly at Cordelia. Some people in this room have forgotten that. They think success means forgetting where you came from, that power means keeping others down. They've spent the last week trying to sabotage me, corrupting my files, spreading lies, doing everything possible to make me fail. That's a serious accusation, one of the board members said. And I can't prove it. Penelope placed the paper on the table, a hand-drawn sketch of the Riverside Project. Simple but powerful. But here's what I can tell you. I could rebuild my entire presentation from memory right now. I could walk you through every calculation, every structural detail, every dollar of the budget. Because I didn't just create this project, I understand it. I believe in it. The revelation, she turned to the sketch. The Riverside Project isn't just about profit margins or shareholder returns. It's about building something that matters. Yes, 30% of units will be affordable housing, and that affordable housing will create community stability, which creates long-term property values, which creates sustainable returns. Yes, the timeline is aggressive, but I've built a team that can deliver it. The real question, Penelope said, looking at each board member in turn, is whether you want to be part of a company that takes chances on people who don't fit the mold, or whether you want to be part of a company that only rewards those who know the secret handshake. The silence was absolute. Julian stood suddenly. May I add something? Theodore nodded, looking confused. I've spent the last week trying to find flaws in Miss Grant's plans, Julian said, his voice carrying across the room. I pushed her, challenged her, through every obstacle I could think of in her path. You want to know what I found? He pulled out his phone, tapping a few times. That her structural engineering is 20% more efficient than our standard designs. That her timeline, while aggressive, is actually achievable with proper resource allocation. That her financial projections are not only realistic, they're conservative. He looked at his mother, something hard in his expression. I also found evidence that someone accessed Miss Grant's files from a guest account Tuesday night. That someone sent emails to board members that conveniently omitted every positive metric from her background check. That someone has been systematically trying to destroy her credibility since the day she was hired. Cordelia's face went white. I have a choice to make right now, Julian continued. I can protect my family's reputation. Or I can do what's right. He turned to Penelope. I should have done this at dinner last week. I should have stood up when Simone spilled wine on you, when my mother made you feel small, when everyone in that room treated you like you didn't belong. I didn't, and I've regretted it every day since. He walked to where Penelope stood, stopping a few feet away. You were right about me. I've spent my whole life in rooms where I was automatically given respect I didn't earn, where my last name opened every door, where I never had to prove I deserved the things I was given. His voice dropped. You've had to fight for every single thing you've accomplished. And instead of respecting that, I tried to tear you down because you made me feel inadequate. Julian Cordelia started. Not now, Mother. He didn't look away from Penelope. I'm voting to approve the Riverside Project exactly as Miss Grant has designed it. And I'm recommending that she be promoted to senior architect with full authority over implementation. The vote. Theodore cleared his throat, his eyes suspiciously bright. All in favor? 12 hands went up immediately. 2 board members looked at Cordelia, then slowly raised their hands as well. The motion passes, Theodore said. Miss Grant, congratulations. Now get out there and build something incredible. The board members filed out, several stopping to shake Penelope's hand, to apologize for doubting her. Cordelia left without a word, her face a mask of fury. Finally, it was just Penelope, Theodore, and Julian. You didn't have to do that, Penelope said quietly to Julian. Yes, I did. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know I've been terrible. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, or even your professional respect. But I want you to know that what I said in their rye meant all of it. You're brilliant, and I was too insecure to admit it. Julian, Penelope took a breath. I don't trust you. You sat at that dinner and said nothing. You spent a week trying to push me out. You've given me every reason to believe you're exactly the kind of person I don't want to work with. I know, but she continued. I also think people can change. And I think you might actually be trying to. So here's the deal. You stay out of my way on Riverside. Let me build it my way. And maybe eventually we can figure out how to be colleagues. maybe even friends. The understanding Julian nodded slowly. That's more than fair. More than I deserve? He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth. When you walked out of that dinner with wine all over your shirt and your head held high, that was the moment I realized I'd spent my entire life surrounded by people who would never do that. People who would compromise, who would apologize, who would make themselves smaller to fit in. You don't make yourself smaller for anyone, he said. And that terrifies me. Because I've built my entire identity around being the biggest presence in any room. And you walked in and made me feel small without even trying. Good, Penelope said. Maybe that's what you needed. Theodore chuckled. I think I'm going to enjoy watching you two work together. Now both of you get out of my office. I have a company to run. The new beginning 3 weeks later, Penelope stood in a trailer at the Riverside construction site, spreading blueprints across a folding table. The ground had been broken that morning, with Theodore wielding a gold-painted shovel and giving a speech about opportunity and community. Julian had been there too, notably without Simone. According to office gossip, they'd ended things the day after the board meeting. Simone had apparently given him an ultimatum, her or his misguided loyalty to that architect. He'd chosen the architect. Or rather, he'd chosen integrity, which amounted to the same thing. A knock on the trailer door. Got a minute? Julian stood at the entrance, holding 2 coffee cups and looking uncertain in expression she'd never seen on him before. That depends, Penelope said. Is this a professional visit, or are you here to tell me my coffee flow analysis is unrealistic? He laughed, a real laugh that reached his eyes. Professional mostly. I thought you might need caffeine. He set 1 cup on her table. Fair trade, organic, no wine involved. Progress. She accepted the coffee. What brings the CEO to my construction trailer? Senior Vice President, he corrected. Dad promoted Rachel to take over some of my responsibilities. Said I needed to learn humility. Which apparently means answering to a 25-year-old who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. The truth, smart man? Your father. He is. Julian looked at the blueprints, genuine interest in his eyes. How's it going? Ahead of schedule, under budget, and the community board actually showed up to our last meeting with cookies. So I'd say pretty well. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching through the trailer window as construction crews worked. I owe you an apology, Julian said suddenly. A real one, not a boardroom performance. I was raised to believe that people like me were better than people like you. And when you showed up and proved that wrong with every breath you took, it broke something in me. I tried to break you back instead of examining my own prejudices. That's honest, Penelope said quietly. I'm trying to be better. It's harder than it sounds. Looked at her directly. You asked if we could be colleagues. Maybe eventually friends. I'd like that. I'd like to learn how to be someone who deserves your respect. Penelope studied him really, looked at him for the first time without anger or defensive walls. She saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, uncertainty in the way he held himself, genuine regret in his expression. You know what? She said, I think we're off to a good start. The reconstruction 6 months later. The Riverside project was taking shape, 2 towers rising against the sky, community spaces emerging from concrete foundations, something real and permanent replacing the vacant lots that had been there before. Penelope stood at the site every morning, watching her vision become reality. Julian came by most afternoons, bringing coffee and asking questions about design choices, listening without judgment. Learning to see buildings as more than profit centers. They weren't friends exactly, not yet. But they were something colleagues who respected each other. 2 people learning to build bridges across the divide between their different worlds. And sometimes, when Penelope saw Julian talking to the construction workers with genuine interest, or when he defended her designs in meetings with the same passion he'd once used to criticize them, she thought maybe people really could change. You did good, Theodore told her one afternoon. Surveying the construction site with satisfaction. Both of you did. We did, Penelope agreed. Watching Julian explain something to a group of community board members, his whole face animated with enthusiasm. She'd walked into the Ashcroft mansion 6 months ago, expecting nothing but a job. She'd left with wine on her shirt and fire in her heart. And she'd built something better than she'd imagined, not just a building, but proof that integrity matters, that standing up for yourself opens doors. That the best way to destroy someone's ego is to build something they can't ignore. The billionaire's ego had been destroyed that night, but what grew in its place was something better: respect, growth, and the beginning of something that might someday become understanding. And that, Penelope thought, was the best kind of reconstruction.